I am Tomas Vicente. I am the head of human resources for Chubb International. I'm joining you today from my home, where I've been working the past 7 weeks, focused on taking care of me, taking care of my family, and taking care of Chubb business. For me, working from home has been uh, both fun and challenging. I'm sure some of you can relate what it means to work or try to work with two kids running, jumping, playing all the time, every day, nonstop. So that's been really complex. I have to acknowledge that I became a fan of all the content that we post in the Taking Care series because of this, right? All the podcast and the articles there have been very helpful to help me balance this personal situation. Uh, now on a more serious note, I believe that as a job leader, it is a privilege to support, to help and provide support to teams um, every day. For me, this have become even more important, more critical during this global pandemic, making sure that we as managers can provide the right level of support. And so for this purpose, I'm pleased to have Dr. Kelley Watts joining me today. Uh, Dr. Kelley have helped us and co-host other Taking Care series in the past few days. So she's now basically part of the Chubb family. So Kelley, welcome back.
Thank you so much. I love family of choice, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so a little bit of background on Kelley. Kelley is a psychotherapist and with a background on coaching on resiliency coach. She had experience working in the United States and Europe, and she helped both corporations and individuals with training, coaching, counseling around this important topic of resiliency and supporting teams. So that being said, I guess we can start with our questions, Kelley. Do you agree?
Sure. Yes, great.
Yeah. So my first question is around the many different situations that our colleagues are living, right? We have colleagues in parts of Asia and China that are planning get back to the office. We have other colleagues that are still in stay-at-home orders or lockdown in Europe, in Latin America, and the United States. We have colleagues working on a urban setting, right, in cities with smaller apartments, smaller spaces. We have other colleagues that have the chance to have a house and have a little bit more of room. We have colleagues that are very worried about their kids, their schools, about their parents, even about their pets, right? How they can manage their whole family. So under this context, Kelley, um, how can we best support our teams?
It's a great question, and I just so applaud Chubb for, leading this conversation. And I think the number one answer to that is having these conversations, asking ourselves, how can we support our teams? So any time and energy that we can spend reflecting on the relationships we have in our lives, it also applies to personal relationships, right? How am I doing and how can I do this better? So you'll find a lot of what we talk about today, while it's in the context of teams, it's actually they're really good universal practices for interacting with the people in your lives. But I would say that how to best lead your team is going to be kind of two parts. Number one, just recognizing that vulnerability that you nodded to, and not necessarily having some formula of criteria where one person has, children at home and an elderly parent, and therefore you allocate them a different workflow. It really needs to be individualized as to how that person is managing the situation, what their context is that they're working in, and you can really only assess that in relationship with each individual. And so in order not to make assumptions about that, I've heard people that have isolated and quarantined alone talk about how their team might be really, they feel like their team is super productive and they're seeing all this content and productivity come out of their team. And they feel as though there's this assumption that because they're home with no dependence, that they should be operating at that same level. And that's not necessarily the case, depending on the challenges that that person is facing. So I'd just like to highlight not to make kind of categorical assumptions about, there might be people with 3 kids at home, but those kids, you know, they manage their own schoolwork and they're able to be more productive. It just really depends on the person and the day, and with fluctuation within each individual. So I think those dialogues need to be ongoing between management and team members. What I'm seeing in terms of good practices is there is a little bit more need for that personal check-in, where it could have been your standard at the office to simply interact and converse about task and work-related items, building in, and ideally in a structured setting. If you have a team meeting, make it known that the first 10 minutes, we're going to go around and check in with everyone. I think it's great when you can create common language, whether it's, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you today? Everybody check in. Or some teams are doing like 1 or 2 words, hits and peaks, but create a kind of ritual of checking in so that you can take the temperature, you know, of each of your teammates and see where they are. And then as a manager, quite honestly, I would be tracking that to some degree, maybe making note on each call of anybody that was below. If it's a 1 to 10, maybe some, and if anybody's reporting below 5, I'm going to make a note so that I can track any patterns and be watching out for people that I need to give extra support to, or reach out to them directly outside of, you know, that routine. I think also, you know, you sharing with them what your plan is. If you're unable to do your job, let's problem solve around that. If a day or a week goes by that, you know, you can't function as normal, I want to hear about it before it becomes a problem, and really just setting the tone for that expectation of disruption, because this was, as you mentioned when we spoke before, it was just so unexpected. And so just making that an understood and normal expectation that things aren't going to plan. So the best we can know, the best you can give me a heads up about realistic expectations, the more I can help with our team's deliverables, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that transparency in how we feel, and strong communication, constant communication, managing expectations frequently, and just be more open and flexible, and is very important in this
moment.
Might
be a change for some teams. That might be a new way to interact, and for some teams they already interact that way, and so it will be more of a learning curve for some than others.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to jump maybe with that last comment to my second question, and this is quite personal for me, right? This is about balancing the behavior as a manager, right? And Chubb has a very particular culture. Chubb is very demanding, very focused on execution and results. We have very talented people and hardworking people, right? And in this crisis, on top of everything we have to do business as usual, some of our colleagues, especially in HR, receive additional tasks related with COVID response. And then on top of that, they have their own personal situations, right, to worry about. So as an example of this, we had around April, May of each year, the Q2M2. The Q2M2 is the forecast. We work in partnership with finance and the business in trying to draft what is going to be the expected expense rate for the rest of the year. And I'm quite new in my job. I only been in this job for 6 months now. So I learned that the different regions, so Europe, Asia, and Latin America, have different processes to achieve this gathering of information, right? And so So with that in mind, and knowing that they have additional COVID-related stuff, that they have personal things to attend, and business as usual. So I struggle a little bit at the beginning of the process into push or be too harsh in asking for formats, for accomplishing precise timelines, etc. So personally, what I did was try to be more adaptable and reduce as much as possible the requests that I asked to them. Obviously, prioritizing on the bare minimum that we needed to have the right information. At the end, my team is very strong, very senior colleagues, very committed. I'm very lucky to have a team like the one that I have. We deliver, right? But it's stuck in my head, this concept of how can I be, as a manager, respectful of these personal situations, these additional workloads, but still asking my colleagues, my teams, to deliver on our responsibilities. So that's my question. How we do that?
Well, and you shared that story with me when we spoke previously, and there are a few more details that I think are relevant because you did such a beautiful job when you shared with me the manner in which you interacted with some of the people while you were trying to figure out different workflows, right? Some of that you may have had to deal with just in your position as you figure out the differences between the regions and how they execute that task, right? But what I heard when you told me that story would line up exactly with what my answer would be. You approached it with firm expectations, but flexibility and adaptability as to how that looked, certainly minimizing any and getting rid of any superfluous tasks related to that. But mostly what I heard when you shared that story with me was that you asked a lot of questions. You showed up with a lot of curiosity around what is possible and held firm, you know, what the outcome needed to be with willingness to support, help, contribute. So generally speaking, when you interact with someone else, what I'm noticing is sometimes when we get resistance or someone saying, I can't do that, or I can't deliver that, sometimes it's a moment of angst, right? Sometimes they're in a space of just a peak of overwhelm. I can't promise that. I can't deliver that. And in that moment, they feel like they can't collaborate, right? That might pass, or it might be a genuine assessment of where they are, right? And so, but the way you approach that with curiosity, the way you were asking questions, collaborating with each of those people so that you were, you know, down in the trenches with them if they needed it, right? That's going to motivate people to, you know, be more productive. It's going to make them feel like things are possible because they won't feel alone, right? Quite different from a response that was via email that just said, you know, I have a lot of compassion for what you're going through and sorry, but I need this by Tuesday, right? It's a very different experience than, okay, I totally understand. What can I do to help? How can we, you know, make this more attainable? You approached it collaboratively and with curiosity and with no criticism around, you know, that them being bad at their job or disappointing you or Chubb, because I'm hearing from people across the board that they feel like a failure in some capacity at any given moment during this experience. And of course we do, right? We're expected to do, we're playing at least 5 roles. We're playing teacher, we're playing, you know, all these things full time where we may have had a staff doing those things. You know, not that I am, you know, we go to public school, so I guess I do employ my teacher with tax money, but like, you know, and so usually we're our own harshest critics. And so to have a manager that doesn't lead with echoing those negative voices in our head, but instead says, hey, I get this, we can do this, it's possible, and we'll do it together, I think motivates people to stay in the game instead of get overwhelmed and check out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I believe that these difficult moments open a door to be more creative, find innovation, maybe challenge how stuff or things had been done in the past, to simplify, to streamline. So there's always opportunity in
Sure.
challenges.
And fingers crossed, some of those learnings and developments and innovations will serve us well moving forward.
So true. My next question is about, and we talk about it offline. It's about how can we spot signs of burnout? How can we as managers can identify the right moment to recommend someone to take some time off? Again, without insulting or without making them feel bad or that they are disappointing or they are losing, right? And personally, I think that there's nothing wrong with taking time off. With recharge yourself is healthy, and I believe in these very difficult times is necessary. So, what do you think?
Absolutely. I think that change takes a lot of energy, right? So when I see people in my private practice, January is a perfect example. They'll come into the office with a laundry list of things that they want to change in their life, all of which are great. And my general feedback is, perfect, pick two, right? Mm-hmm. And we can get to the others, but you need to make peace with the fact that we can't change everything all at once. So burnout can come from neglecting physical health. It can come from, not having the same intellectual stimulation or spiritual stimulation that you might normally engage in. And when that goes on too long, we get depleted. And so I like to think of it as like a diversity equation. Are you contributing to every facet of your life, or has one been neglected for too long? So obviously, ideally, it would be preferable to prevent that by keeping an eye on that. And so I think as a team, you have dialogue about, share, what are you doing? I know you shared quite a few things with me that you're engaging in. You still exercise quite, rigorously. You spend time with your family quite mindfully and turn things off. So sharing your practices and knowing by just engaging in dialogue with your teammates, what are you doing? And if you've lost some of your previous practices, I want you to be a happy person, right? Because then you can show up in a different way when it's time to check into work.
Yeah. I think that the concept of be resilient and it's okay to fall as long as you stand up again, right? So kind of it's okay to give you a break, and we as a company are okay with that, right?
Well, not only are okay with it, we demand it, right? If you shift that from okay, it's okay, I guess we're all right with it, to preemptively expecting that of people. How are you taking care of yourself? I want to know. I want you to show me what that looks like in your life.
I'm receiving a text that we have a couple of good questions from the audience, and okay. so I will pass it to you, Caroline, for these questions.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks, Tomas. I think this is really great discussion, and we do have a couple good questions. So, Kelley, the first one I will ask is from someone that says, I have someone that is insecure and rattled by the uncertainty of the situation and jumps right to the worst case scenario. How can I best support? What else can I do?
Managers are often really good at a job and then get promoted to management and often aren't equipped yet, as they're on a new learning curve to learn how to manage people. But I actually think that question is even beyond the scope of management. That's really a person that needs to do their own cognitive work. There are some great styles of therapy. One in particular that comes to mind for that is called acceptance and commitment therapy. Anything someone can do, I would recommend books to that person. Claudine and I were speaking about one of my very favorites that I think every single human should read is Mindset by Carol Dweck. And it really teaches us that everything is a skill and everything is learnable and teachable. And really approaching life that way is a game changer. And if we don't learn to use our brains for, use for good instead of evil, the natural progression will be that our brain will fixate on the negative. It's our brain's job to keep us safe. But as a manager, I think more importantly, know where your boundaries are in terms of if you think this person needs to go and do some work on themselves, I would point to resources and support that don't necessarily need to be you.
So the next question that we have is, what advice do you have in balancing team norms with new team meeting structures required in a remote environment? WebEx has been helpful at staying connected, but is also feeling a bit exhausting after several weeks. What advice do you have in balancing virtual collaboration with more personal one-on-one touch points?
I think there's space for both. And I'm not sure what your team norms they're referring to are, but I certainly think that this context requires an adjustment to those norms. And I think you can speak to those with your team. But hey, usually we do an hour and a half team meeting every week. I've decided I'm going to cut that to 45 minutes twice a week, and I'm going to do more individual check-ins. And I think you as a manager should embrace the idea of trial and error. And try it if it's not working the way. I think there was this tendency, especially 6-8 weeks ago, to just say, let's do everything that we do in normal life, but turn it virtual, right? And use the same template, but just different platforms. And most people are finding that that doesn't necessarily work perfectly for them. And so try something new, create a new format or process and see, and then adjust accordingly. And so in doing that, you're modeling for your team that collaborative trial and error that in and of itself is the resiliency model, right? Being willing to reflect, look at what's working, look at what's not, adjust, and know that that even version 2 is not going to get it right. It's a constant evolution of what could we do better, what's working, what's not. And so I think as a team, you could really grow it much stronger just by modeling that process.
Yeah. And a little variation on that question, but still sort of focusing on the sort of WebEx interaction, is any suggestions on sort of how to keep the daily team WebEx meetings interesting and not just repetitive? And are there any practical tips on this, or is it okay just to hear everyone say they're okay or not okay every day?
Yeah, I personally don't love the okay or not okay. It gives you very little actual real data. Right? And I think we're socialized to answer the question, how are you, with I'm good. So I don't think it actually invites transparency and true authentic response. So I would, I gave a few examples earlier. You can come up with your own, depends on the team and the culture and what you want to do. You could, pick a color that represents how you feel today. Tell me why that feels that way to you. Here's a feelings chart. If you really want to go emotional and check in on that might be more kind of feelings related than you want to be. But I love the pits and peaks, right? Tell me the best thing that's going on for you right now and tell me the hardest thing, because that gives you a real sense of where someone is. Because we all just habitually can shift into I'm good, right? Without really pausing to say, how am I really? And so if you genuinely want to check in with your team, I think that that's a way to do it. So there are so many ideas of great kind of icebreakers and things. I've been part of ones where you change your name on your WebEx or Zoom, change your identifier to something, jump in and tell people what you had for breakfast. There's ways to kind of personalize it. And so I would just try to get creative. And if that feels hard for you, there's lots of ideas on the web. But I would steer away from feeling, if you feel like you ticked the box to check in with everyone and everyone said okay, I do feel like that might be a waste of time.
Yeah. I feel like our audience today is really working together, because the next question is, again, it's sort of a different theme on that, right? And it's, I sense that someone on my team is having a hard time, but doesn't want to tell me. So suggestions on how I might better draw that out. And I think you maybe just touched on that a little bit, but this year a little specific.
Right. So, I mean, if I could speak to this person directly, my first question would be, so is there a hesitation to ask them, right? I think one of the questions Tomas asked about burnout, there's, first of all, burnout's more prevalent than ever right now. It's going to be, especially our, highly productive, highly effective people. They came out of the gate saying, I got this, I'm going to do this, and often neglecting to pause and take care of themselves. So we're hitting a place right now where that's very real, and people are struggling at different points in this process. And so to sideline with them and say, hey, these are the behaviors I'm seeing that feel off for you. Am I reading this right? And giving them an opportunity to tell you. Because typically as a manager looking for burnout, we would want to look in a change of a pattern of behavior, right? But everything's changed. And so it's much harder to keep your finger on where people are. Is this kind of normal. I don't love that word, but is this a, you know, consistent pattern for them, or is this something to be a red flag? And so the short version is ask them. Right. And if they don't answer, I'll preemptively ask the follow-up question that always comes to that. If they don't respond and share, that's their choice. And I think that as a manager, you could say, hey, I'm checking in because I'm seeing these things. I want you to know it's only me trying to make sure that you're supportive. And if they say, no, no, I'm fine, then your wrap-up should be, I get that. You might want to talk about some of the behaviors you're concerned about and leave the window open, right? Say, I would like to think that you would come to me before it's a concern. I want to support you. Let me know how how we can lean in. And make sure that if they do come to you, or especially if they, in a team meeting, see someone share something vulnerable, that you lead with empathy first, and then go to problem solving.
And last question before I turn it back to Tomas is just a very quick, you shared the name of a book. Could you share the name of that book one more time?
Sure. Mindset by Carol Dweck. I know Claudine's a big fan, so we can put it in the resource somehow, I'm sure.
Yep, we'll certainly get that up on the Village, the name of that book and the author. So I think with that, Tomas, I will turn it back to you to close since we are just about at our time.
Yes, Caroline, thank you. Time flies. How fast 30 minutes went. It's incredible. So much interesting stuff to discuss during this scenario. So, Kelley, many thanks. Many thanks for being here, for your help, and for your contributions. I guess we will be talking again in the future. I hope so. And now for our colleagues that joined, please remember that for other events, for the replay of this video conference, and the resources available on the Taking Care series are available on the Village. Please make sure that you visit the website and use them. Thank you very much for listening. Stay safe. Gracias a todos y cuídense.
Thank you.